You're watching the Stories That Scare channel. There is no turning back now.
3 true night security horror stories. Hey everybody, I'm glad y'all stopped by. Most people think working night security is easy. Walk around, check a few doors, watch security cameras, stay awake until sunrise. But when everyone else goes home, and you're the only person left inside a building, every strange noise, every flickering light, every unexplained shadow becomes your responsibility. I started looking online for stories from night security guards who claimed they experienced something they still can't explain. Whether these stories are true or just the product of too many lonely nights, I'll let y'all decide. All right, let's get into the first one. This first story was shared by a security officer who worked overnight at a 12-story office building. Here's what he had to say. I worked the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift for nearly 3 years. Most nights were boring. I'd patrol every floor, lock any offices people accidentally left open, then spend the rest of the night watching security cameras. The building had 12 floors, but only the first 9 were occupied. Floors 10, 11, and 12 had been vacant for years while the owners searched for new tenants. Nobody was supposed to be up there. Every hallway light stayed off. The elevators required a security key, and every entrance was alarmed. One Tuesday, around 2:15 in the morning, camera 47 briefly flickered. It covered the hallway outside suite 1108. When the picture came back, someone was standing at the end of the hallway. A man, wearing a dark business suit, hands folded in front of him. Perfectly still, I zoomed the camera in. The image became grainy. But one thing was obvious, he wasn't wearing an employee badge. I radioed my supervisor. No response, probably asleep. So I grabbed my flashlight, my master key, and took the elevator to the 11th floor. The doors opened. Complete darkness. Only my flashlight illuminated the hallway. I walked towards suite 1108. Nobody. Every office door remained locked. No signs of forced entry. No open windows. Nothing. I sighed. Figured the camera had glitched. Then my radio crackled. Dispatch finally answered. You okay up there? Yeah. False alarm. There was a long pause. Then dispatch quietly asked, Then who's the man? Standing behind you on camera 47? I spun around so fast, my flashlight beam bounced wildly across the walls. It's nothing. Just empty offices, closed doors, silence. I grabbed the radio. Dispatch. Say that again. Another pause, then, never mind. The hallway's empty now. That wasn't exactly comforting. I walked back to the elevator, pressed the call button, nothing. The display stayed dark. No chime. No movement. I tried the stairs instead. The heavy fire door slowly creaked open. As I stepped inside, I heard footsteps above me, slow, measured, 1 floor higher. Step, step, step. That made no sense. The 12th floor was locked. Nobody had access except building management. I climbed 1 flight. The stairwell door to 12 was standing open. I'd checked it less than an hour earlier. It had definitely been locked. I pushed it open. The hallway stretched into darkness. Rows of empty office suites. Plastic still covering old furniture. Dust everywhere. The air smelled stale, like nobody had opened a window in years. Then I saw movement. A man in a dark suit, walking calmly across the far end of the hallway. Not running, not hiding, just walking, I shouted. Security! Stop where you are! He turned the corner. I ran after him. When I reached the intersection, the hallway was empty. Every office remained locked. There was nowhere to go. That's when I noticed something strange. The dust. Every surface was covered in it, except a trail of fresh footprints. Dress shoes, leading down the hallway. I followed them. 1 set, then 2, then 3. By the time they reached the largest office suite, there were dozens of footprints, all walking in the same direction, none coming back. The trail ended at the conference room door. I unlocked it. The room was empty. A long table, old office chairs. Nothing else. Then the motion sensor lights came on by themselves. One after another, until the entire room was illuminated. Every chair around the conference table was pulled out, except one, the chair at the head of the table. It slowly slid backward, as though someone had just stood up. I backed out immediately, locked the door. and rode the elevator down as soon as it started working again. When my supervisor arrived that morning, I showed him the camera footage. The suited man appeared for exactly 11 seconds, walking down the hallway. Then he simply vanished. The supervisor stared at the screen, then quietly said, "That's impossible." I asked why. He opened an old file cabinet inside the security office. From a dusty folder, he pulled out a newspaper clipping. Years earlier, before the company moved out, the building's board of directors had held a late-night meeting on the 11th floor. During the meeting, a gas leak filled the conference room. 11 executives died before anyone realized what was happening. I looked back at camera 47. The suited man had been walking toward that very conference room. The supervisor quietly whispered, "We've replaced that camera 3 times. It always records him. Maybe some meetings never really end." All right, let's move on to story number 2. This next story was shared by a night security guard who patrolled a large shopping mall. If you've ever been inside a mall after closing, it's nothing like it is during the day. No music, no shoppers, just long empty corridors, storefronts hidden behind metal security gates, and hundreds of mannequins staring into the darkness. Here's what he had to say. "I worked overnight security at a mall in Ohio. Our shift started at 10 p.m. once the cleaning crews left. The building belonged to us. Every hour, we walked the entire mall, checking emergency exits, store gates, loading docks. It became routine. Until store 214, an old clothing store near the east entrance. Every single night, at exactly 3:07 a.m., its security gate would be open, not all the way, just 3 feet. Enough for someone to walk inside. The strange part, every tenant manager set their own gate before leaving, and ours couldn't be opened without a key. The first time I found it, I assumed an employee forgot to lock it. I closed it, reset the alarm, went on with my patrol. The next night, 3:07, open again, same height, same position. Third night, same thing. So I decided to catch whoever was doing it. At 2:55, I positioned myself across from the store. I had a direct view of the entrance. Nothing moved. No one walked by. The hallway was completely empty. My watch ticked closer. 3:06, 3:07. Without making a sound, the metal gate slowly began rising. 1 inch, then another, then another. There was no motor noise, no rattling chain, just movement. Until it stopped, exactly 3 feet off the floor. I sprinted across the hallway, a flashlight drawn. Security. No response. I ducked under the gate. The store was pitch black. Rows of clothing racks disappeared into the darkness. I reached for the light switch. Nothing. Power was off after hours. I swept my flashlight across the room. Women's jackets, shoes, mirrors. Nothing unusual. Then, the beam landed on a mannequin. Standing in the center aisle, its head was turned toward me. I frowned. I'd walked this store dozens of times. That mannequin had always faced the front display window. I looked away for only a second. When my flashlight returned, there were 2 mannequins, standing side by side, both facing me. I actually laughed. Very funny, thinking another guard had moved them. Then, my radio crackled. It was dispatch. "Unit 3, what are you doing inside store 214? "I'm checking it." There was a long silence. Then she quietly asked, "Then who is walking behind you?" I turned around. Nothing. The flashlight swept across empty racks. No person, no mannequin, just darkness. Then, from somewhere deeper inside the store, I heard the unmistakable sound of plastic feet, sliding across tile, one after another. You know, mannequins have always been creepy. Maybe it's because they're shaped like us, but not quite. Or maybe some of them aren't as empty as they look. All right, we've got one last story. And trust me, this final one is the one I'd never want to experience. This last story was shared by a security officer who worked the overnight shift at a regional hospital. Hospitals never truly sleep. Even at 3 a.m, someone is always awake. Doctors, nurses, patients, security. Which means, when an emergency call comes through, you don't ignore it. Here's what he had to say. I worked hospital security for almost 6 years. Most of our calls weren't emergencies. Visitors getting lost. Patients trying to leave. Someone smoking outside an entrance. Pretty routine stuff. One rainy Tuesday night, at exactly 2:42 a.m., my radio crackled. Security to room 407. Patient requesting immediate assistance. I acknowledged the call, grabbed my flashlight, and headed upstairs. As I stepped off the elevator, something immediately felt wrong. The hallway was completely dark. No nurses, no patients, no machines beeping. Nothing. Hospitals are never that quiet. I checked the room numbers. 401, 403, 405. Then, the door was already open. I knocked anyway. Hospital security. No answer. I slowly stepped inside. The room was empty. No bed, no medical equipment, no television, nothing. Just bare concrete walls, covered by old plastic sheeting. It looked like the room had been under construction for years. Then, my radio crackled again. Unit 4. Has the patient made contact? I answered. There's nobody here. Dispatch paused. What do you mean? The room's empty. Another pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. There isn't a room 407. I laughed. I'm standing in it. No, there isn't. She asked me to read the room numbers again. I walked back into the hallway. 401, 403, 405, then nothing. Where room 407 had been was a solid wall, no doorway, no room, just freshly painted drywall. I actually reached out, touched it, cold, perfectly smooth. My stomach dropped. I turned around. The room I'd just walked out of was gone. I hurried downstairs, certain I was losing my mind. When I reached dispatch, the operator looked pale. She turned her monitor toward me. Look at the call log. At exactly 2:42 a.m., a distress call had come from room 407, automatically generated by the nurse call system. I asked how that was possible. She quietly opened an old maintenance report. Years earlier, before the hospital had been renovated, room 407 had existed. A fire had started there after faulty electrical work. The patient inside never made it out. During renovations, that entire wing was redesigned. Room 407 was permanently removed. The nurse call button had been disconnected decades ago. Or, at least, it was supposed to have been. I requested the surveillance footage. The camera outside the fourth-floor hallway showed me walking toward a blank wall, stopping, knocking 3 times as though a door were standing in front of me, then stepping sideways and disappearing. For almost 4 minutes, the hallway was empty. Then, I walked back into view, looking completely terrified. There was no doorway, no room, no explanation. I resigned 2 weeks later. I still work security, just not in hospitals. And every now and then, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I swear I hear a radio quietly repeating, "Security to room 407. Maybe some emergency calls never stop coming. And maybe there are places where help arrived, just a little too late. If you enjoyed these stories, let me know which one got under your skin the most. And if you've ever worked night security, or experienced something you still can't explain while working alone after dark, I'd love to read about it in the comments. Who knows? Your story might appear in a future episode. Until next time, keep the fires burning. And as always, I'll tell the stories, if you'll stay scared.